as a sort of preview for how Trump cultists may react in 2 weeks when Trump is finally gone. Yesterday, there was a pro-Trump rally in advance of today's counting of the electoral votes in Washington, D.C. And it is really something to behold. This is compelling culturally, psychologically, politically, scientifically. It's really important for us to understand that this contingent, these factions exist, and they are very radical. To pretend that they don't exist doesn't do us any good. It achieves nothing to pretend they don't exist. So let's look at some clips and remember that the real point here is that it's a pro-Trump rally to support Donald Trump stealing the election from Joe Biden. Now, ostensibly, this is a political rally saying Trump actually won. Let's figure out how to take it. OK, that's crazy, but that's ostensibly what this is. But the way in which the Trump was rigged stuff overlaps with anti-vaccine nonsense. It overlaps with anti-Semitism, of course. It overlaps with anti-science ideology. It's important to understand the sort of Venn diagram because it confirms much of what conspiracy experts have told us. I've interviewed many conspiracy experts on the show, and they almost unanimously say some conspiracy theories seem benign. Flat Earth, for example. You believe the Earth is flat. You can't really do anything with that. You're not going to be able to push people off the edge because there is no edge, etc. But the point is that certain people are just more prone to believe conspiracies. And so when we say flat Earth is benign, okay, but those same people are predisposed to believe other stuff that is more dangerous and has more real world implications. So let's get right into it. Here is one speaker referring to the deceptively named biological agent known as a vaccine. That's a quote. Take a listen.
Must not comply. If you don't want to take an experimental biological agent deceptively named a vaccine, you must not allow yourself to be coerced. If you are living in fear of a non-lethal virus, simply buy the same cheap, ordinary medicines used across the world. When you know something to be false, you must reject it. Period. When you know something to be true, you must stand up for it, and you must be willing to fight for it. I urge you to mark this day, this moment, as a united return of our nation to the eternal fight for freedom, a commitment to integrity, a resolve to seek the truth in all arenas, and to always act upon it. Americans, God bless America.
Okay, so that's pro-Trump steal the election insanity merged with anti-vax conspiracies. That's one example as to how these groups interact. All right. Here is pro-Trump steal the election stuff merging with more general anti-communist Hugo Chavez conspiracy theories, which we've heard before.
Who knows that? Sequoia Smartmatic. And that company was founded by Hugo Chavez in communist Venezuela. Step 3, your votes were exported.
And then, of course, much of this also combining with the anti-science stuff that directly leads to COVID deaths. And it's all kind of wrapped up in this clip with religiosity, because I guess Jesus would say, don't wear a mask. You tell me.
So what I'm asking you to do right now is to do the Great Reset in a good way. Okay, we're going to reframe it. Last night, about 150 of us went into Whole Foods, and we dressed up like people that aren't idiots hiding from a virus that's not deadly. We did not wear a mask. Who here is up to the task of not wearing a mask? I ask you again, who here is up to the task of not wearing a mask? Jesus is king, and it's time to let freedom ring, ladies and gentlemen.
So that's, I guess, claiming that the word of God is not to wear masks during a pandemic. And that same guy also claimed that COVID tests are fake. What that even means, I don't know, but let's take a listen.
The PCR tests are fake. The COVID-19 PCR tests are fake. And if you go to my podcast, you can hear interviews. You can hear the founder of the PCR test, Kerry Mullins, explaining to you the PCR tests are supposed to be calibrated at 17, someone should write this down, 17 to 20 cycles. Those are calibrated at 40 cycles. What does that mean? It means that it's like your speedometer is telling you you're driving 400 miles an hour when you're driving 7 miles an hour.
So the COVID tests are fake. That's actually a new one. And then we get into the anti-Semitism. Now it's about George Soros, a Jewish man, secretly controlling Supreme Court justices. Just a typical anti-Semitic dog whistle.
Now, our next speaker is one of the most fiery activists I've ever known. She's tireless. She's relentless. She will do research. She's the only person I know who does. She watches George Soros speeches for fun. But you know what happened when she looked one of those up? She found that he was talking about Chief Justice John Roberts like George Soros owned him. And Lynn Wood retweeted it for her. She gets this information because she never stops fighting.
George Soros is controlling John Roberts. George Soros is the real puppet master of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. That's the idea. And as I've said before, you have to know what you're listening for. That's the thing about dog whistles. It's much like when you blow a dog whistle, the dog has ears tuned to hear it, so they hear the whistle. It's the same thing with these anti-Semitic tropes and dog whistles. You have to understand the context and what they're referring to. And then lastly, Alex Jones doesn't need much of an introduction, not looking good, not sounding good, but saying very, very wild things.
We don't quietly take the election fraud. We don't quietly take the scam and believe their BS. We've seen the evidence. The system has had to desperately engage in this gambit to maintain control, but this will be their Waterloo. This will be their destruction. Whatever happens to President Trump in 15 days, he is still the elected president of this republic, and we do not recognize the communist Chinese agent Joe Biden or his controllers.
Yeah, so that's, again, it's either a character that he's playing or a very, very sick guy. So my question, I sort of have a short-term and a medium-term question on these folks. Short-term is, what do they do tomorrow when the vote will have been certified, the electoral vote will have been counted in the House and Senate for Joe Biden? What do they do on January 20th when Trump leaves? Do they get violent? What happens? That's the short-term question. The more medium-term question is, do these people even stay engaged with the political world? Many of them were never engaged before Trump. They were they sort of joined politics directly into the Trump cult. And I don't know the answer as to whether they just get out of politics or they stay. And much of it might depend on what Trump does for the next 2 or 4 years. Does Trump remain engaged in politics, or does he disappear to wherever will allow him and just kind of play golf and sit around? Questions we don't yet have answers to. And we'll continue covering this and these events on our Instagram, where you can find us at David Pakman Show. A lot of the shirts you see me wearing on YouTube are actually made by a company called Teddy Stratford. I love these shirts, and that's why I asked them to be a sponsor of the show. It really is the most innovative shirt you can buy, because most slim fit button-up shirts give you this weird stretched out gap in the chest where the buttons are. You don't get that with the Teddy Stratford shirts, because all of their shirts come with a patented zipper hidden beneath the buttons, which prevents the chest from stretching apart like that. But most importantly, just overall, it makes the shirt fit much better and look better. The carefully designed shirt is also cut in a way that improves the look of your upper body physique. It has a really nice, elegant, close fit that other shirts don't really give you. It also has a specially designed collar that won't fall down and lay flat, which I love. The difference all around with these shirts really is noticeable. Go check them out at davidpakman.com/Teddy. The link is down below, and they'll give you 15% off your first order if you use the coupon code PAKMAN at checkout.